Hey, what's up guys? I'm Mr. Chris with infotainment.com. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to install our Ford Perimeter Plus, the OEM alarm system, into a few different types of Fords. First of which, I'm going to be doing it on this 2024 Ford Transit. These alarms are extremely DIY friendly, plug and play. Besides a programmer, depending on your vehicle, it may include a programmer. For this one, it does not need one. It's a very easy install. Let's get into it. All right, so what we're gonna do first is we need to plug in our plug and play alarm harness. And in order to do that, we need to reach the gateway module, which is right behind this panel here. The easiest way you can do that is by you have this compartment here. There's a little hole up top. You kind of pull straight back towards it, this whole thing will pop out. And then we're gonna have to drop the glove box down. So when you drop the glove box down, I got this giant panel tool, which helps me with leverage, but basically you're just going to push the sides in and the whole glove box will just kind of release. You don't have to pull it all the way out, just resting down just like that is fine. All right, so basically why we pulled this little cubby out is because the gateway, the way it's situated, the harness is aiming towards the passenger side. There's a little metal cover or plate that is very close to the top of this connector. So the easiest way to unplug that is coming in from the side, pressing down on that connector and then pulling straight out. So let's do that now. All right, so you can see it's a little tight in here. And if you got a little flathead, that might help you out. But once you get that connector in the middle pressed down, that should just slide right out for you, just like this. Now we'll get this new plug. And be sure to press it in nice and firm and give it a tug just so you know it's plugged in there. And now the other end will get plugged into our new harness. All right, just like that. And now we're good to go to move on to mounting the alarm. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is plug in our pass-through harness. I also already plugged in the little pigtail that came with the alarm, and this is to enable remote start. Now, I found a pretty cool location that I think will work out well for me, which is right here on this main harness. It's very secure. I'm gonna throw a zip tie around the whole thing, and basically you can put this anywhere you want, but what I'm trying to do is make sure I have access to this dial. Once you have it mounted, if you need to adjust it at all, you're gonna have to come in here and adjust that dial to adjust sensitivity. So this is the perfect spot for me. All right, so the alarm brain is mounted, and from that little cubby that we removed earlier, you can see I have easy access. I don't have to drop the glove box, but easy access to get to that shock sensor. So if we need to adjust this in the future, let's say it's going off too much or not enough, the dial is really, really easy to get to. All right, so since we got that mounted, I'll go ahead and put our glove box back up. And I'll actually leave this cubby out for the shock sensor testing. Once I finish the shock sensor testing, I'll go ahead and pop this back in there. All right, so to activate the alarm, basically we gotta cycle the ignition, turning it on and off, and that's gonna acclimate the alarm to the vehicle. Turn that on and off. We'll get the locks to cycle, as you could hear, and now our alarm should be working. The easiest way to test that without testing the shock sensor is to remote start it, because we have our remote start pigtail plugged into the alarm, which is lock, unlock, lock. You can see no key, but the vehicle did start. To deactivate it, it's that same sequence that you did to remote start it. We'll shut it off as well. Now, when we remote started it, if you wanted to just take off and drive with it running, stick the key in the ignition, turn it on, hit the brakes, and you're good to go. Now we'll test the shock sensor, make sure it's set to where we want it to be, and this alarm install is finished right after that. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and arm the vehicle, which is simply locking the vehicle with the key fob. And with the Perimeter Plus alarm systems, you want to give them about 10-15 seconds. They say up to a minute for the alarm to kind of figure itself out and not give you a false trigger. So we give a little bit of time. The way I like to test it is just by tapping the door. And if it seems like it's not sensitive enough, then it won't go off. You can adjust that shock sensor, just twisting that dial to the right clockwise will increase the sensitivity, and counterclockwise will decrease it. All right, so that's about right. It'll give you a warn with any kind of significant impact. and when it gets progressively harder, it'll go off. When you unarm it after it's gone off, it'll give you a double honk, letting you know that the alarm went off. So if you come back to the vehicle and you unarm the vehicle and it gives you 2 honks, that's indicating that the alarm went off sometime while you were gone. Maybe you didn't hear it, you weren't in range. But the alarm will cycle for about a minute. Hopefully that wards off any kind of threat that the vehicle had. All right, so that was the install on the 2024 Ford Transit. Make sure to check our website for vehicle compatibility. We have these listed for many different vehicle models as well as years. Now let's jump into the next vehicle and show you how to install it in that one. All right, so now we are in a 2024 Ford Expedition. We're going to show you where the gateway module is to plug in your alarm harness. That's actually right behind the screen. It's actually more down here, but we're going to remove the screen to gain access to it. And to do that, it's pretty easy. Right up top, you have a rubber pad that pops up. Right behind the screen, you have a little trim panel in here that you can pop up with a panel tool. And this is just held in with some retaining clips. And the reason why you want to pop this up is because there's 3 8mm screws holding the screen down right behind it. There's one in the center, 2 on the sides, very similar to the new Mustang. So once you pull that out, the screen will pop out and that'll give us better access to our gateway module. All right, you got that one in the center, 2 more down the sides in those openings, and that's where I'm going to use a magnet because they're kind of deep in there. If you don't have a magnetic 8mm socket, that long magnet will help you out. All right, now our screen will just pop straight back. And we just need to unplug these connectors. And the pink one can be a little bit tight in there. Get that out of the way. And now we have 4 7mm screws that we're going to pull out just to give our arm a little bit of access to get in there. And actually, before we pull the screws out, I'm going to take these wire connectors off of the metal bracket here. There we go. And now we can pull the 4 7mm out. And this bracket is separate from the ACM that's actually back here. Pull this out. And then we can pull this whole guy out. We don't have to unplug this. We just got to kind of wiggle it out of here. And we'll set it up top. And that's just going to give us enough room to access our gateway module, which is way down there at the bottom. All right, so right back here you can see this module way in the back. This is our gateway module, and the wire that we're trying to access is on the passenger side of it. The plug is on the side, and it may take a little wiggling to get it out of there. It's pretty tight in there. That button is right on the front side of it, so you're going to be pressing towards the front of the vehicle and to the passenger side, and that'll pull this plug out of that gateway module. Now basically all we have to do is plug in our pass-through harness, plug this back into the gateway module, and the rest of the install is like the first vehicle that we showed you the alarm install on. Everything else is identical. So from there you just reinstall your ACM, the screen, and put everything back together and test out your alarm. All right, so now we're in a 2024 Ford Super Duty. This is the F250 350 body style. We're going to show you how to access that gateway module. It's actually right up behind your climate control panel. If you have a center console version in your truck, the location of that gateway module is going to be the same, but the installation is going to be slightly different. For the ones with the center console, you're actually going to have to remove the radio to access it from the top. But for this version without, we're going to access this from the bottom, which I think is actually a little bit easier. But where we're going to start is actually with this dash bezel that's going all the way around your cluster and your radio. This thing will pop rearward, very similar to the F-150, but it's just a little bit longer. We're going to make our way over to the driver's side. And once you make it over to that driver's side AC vent, you're going to want to pop this shroud back just a little bit because it is overlapping this section here for this longer piece. We'll set this up here, and now we're going to remove this long center dash trim that says Super Duty on it. We're going to come over to the passenger side AC vent and just make our way over, pull in rearward all the way down to around your key. Everything is just held in with clips. It'll pop out pretty easily. When you're pulling, you always want to make sure that you don't just yank. You want to support the weaker sections, you know, because you can probably snap this pretty easily. Next up, we're going to remove this bottom dash panel here. This is actually wrapped around on both sides of your dash, but on the driver's side, near the gas pedal, you have a single 7mm screw that you have to pull out. And then it's just held in with retaining clips the rest of the way around. And on the passenger side, you have this soft wrapped panel right below your glove box. I can just pull that edge down, and this panel also has a clip on it aiming towards the center, so you got to pull this away from the center. Then you'll pop that whole piece free. All right, now you're left with the two side panels on the side of your AC bezel that just pull rearward, that is held in with some clips. We'll snap both of those out, set them aside. And now we can go ahead and pull out the 4 7mm that are holding on our climate bezel. All right, now this whole center panel will pull rearward just with some snaps. And we can go ahead and unplug all of these connectors just to give us a little bit of room back here to work with. All right, we'll set this aside. All right, with all of this removed, now you actually can see your A-pin under here, as well as you have this hole right through this bracket, and that's actually where your gateway module is. It's right behind your A-pin. So if I stick my hand up underneath here, you're gonna have a hard time seeing what I'm doing. There's a clip with the connector that we're looking for. Now, this is plugged in back here, and sometimes that clip is kind of hard to press, so a little flathead, you can stick it through this hole, get leverage to press that little button down right here, and kind of wedge this thing out of there if you have a hard time with your finger. But I feel you have enough room where this is not an issue. So with it plugged in back there, you should be able to just depress that with your thumb, pull out, and from here you can slide in your pass-through harness, plug in the other end, and then plug in your alarm, and continue with the installation just like we did in the prior vehicles. Once this is all done, you're going to want to test the sensitivity of the alarm before you go ahead and cover it all back up and hide it away wherever you're going to mount that. Just because if you reattach everything, you cover up that alarm, and you find out it's too sensitive or not sensitive enough, you don't want it to be a pain in the butt to get back in there just to adjust that little dial. All right, now we can move on to the next vehicle. All right, so we're in a 21 Plus F-150. This is gonna cover all of your small screens, big screens. I'm gonna try and give you a good explanation of both. To install your Perimeter Plus into the F-150, you need to access the gateway module just like all the other vehicles, and that is located behind. It's actually kind of behind here, way in the back, but because it's back there, we have to pull off quite a bit of stuff here. So where we're gonna start is around our radio. We gotta pull the radio bezel, then we're gonna pull this long trim panel here. I'm gonna grab my panel tool. You don't really need a panel tool to do this, but it may help. There we go. These parts are very thin, so you don't wanna yank from the top because you may break this. Next up, we're gonna pop off this little rubber mat in our tray here. Some of you, if you have a really stripped down model, you won't have that rubber mat. Also, some of you will have 4 screws up here. This one only has 2. But if you have 4, make sure to just rub your hand back here. Make sure you don't have 2 more hidden 7mm screws that are holding this top tray on. And I'm going to use an angle with my 7mm to make life easier. And all the 7mm that we're going to remove from the dash here are pretty much the same, so you don't have to worry about getting them wrong when you're putting it back together. This will pop up, and then underneath you have a single plug in the middle. You may have a speaker up here also that you'd have to pop off the speaker grill to get to those screws, but if you don't, it's much easier. Pull that out, disconnect your plug, and you can set that aside. Next up, because we have to pull the climate control out, we have to take our side panels off. So to do that, basically put a little gap in your side panel, pop it inwards first, and then towards the rear. Okay, we'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, now up underneath your key cylinder, your knee bolster panel right here is hiding 2 screws. Up above your key cylinder, behind your instrument cluster bezel, there's a single screw that's hidden holding on your radio bezel besides all the other screws that you can see exposed. So to access that, we're going to drop this down. There you can see those 2 screws. And once you have those out, you can go ahead and grab underneath that key cylinder, and you're going to want to pop to the rear just a little bit, and that's going to give you just enough room. You don't have to pull the whole bezel out, but that's going to give you just enough room where you can access that hidden 7mm screw. And it's this screw hidden right back here, and it helps if you have a magnetic bit driver. You can pull that out, and once we have that off, now we can continue with the perimeter of your climate control and your radio bezel. All right, now we'll pull all these 7mm out. All right, now if you have a 12-inch screen, you will have 2 more 7mm screws that are hidden right behind your screen that you got to pull out. If you have the 8-inch screen, you don't have to worry about these. But we have the 12-inch upgrade in our truck. So we have 1 7mm here and another one down there. This is extremely helpful if you have a magnetic bit driver. All right, so now we have all the 7mm removed, even the 2 hidden ones behind the screen. Now you can go ahead and pull your climate control out, unplug all the plugs, and we're going to set this aside. And same thing with our screen. This LVDS cable is usually kind of a pain. There we go. I'll set our screen aside. All right, so now that we got into our dash where we need to access to get to our gateway, you can see it's behind the APIM here. So the plug is actually way down here. You have a couple options. The correct way is to pull this whole thing out. You have 2 8mm on the right, 1 on the left. You'll pop those out. You remove these wires, and then you can tilt this whole thing down to access that plug. Another way is if you had a long panel tool, you could also get back in there and unplug it from the back, pull the wire up, plug in your T-harness, and you'll be good to go. But we're gonna do it the right way. We're going to take everything apart here. So you got 2 8mm on the right and 1 on the left. Now our whole module will pull out, and actually to make life a little easier, I'm going to pop off this little connector right here and this one down here. And that'll allow me to just spin it a little bit more so I can get access to our plug that's way at the bottom down here. All right, and there's our plug right here on our gateway. Squeeze that connector, get that out of there. Now we can grab our T-harness, plug that in, make sure it's a good connection, And we'll plug the vehicle harness into there. And now we're good to go. I'm gonna spin this back into place, get all the connectors back in, and screw it back down. Now this end of the T-harness, I'll show you what to do with this later. This is where our alarm module is gonna actually plug into, and I'm gonna run this over to the glove box side. Seems like a good option to have easy access to that shock sensor on there, but I'll show you that once I put all this back together. And there's a couple of alignment pins here that this whole bracket will sit in. Let me get these connectors pushed back in here. All right, so from here, I'm gonna drop our glove box. On either side, you have a little push tab. You push those in, the glove box will come down a little bit more and you just pull straight back. Doesn't require any tools to remove your glove box. And with everything removed here, you can see we have a clear shot that we can just grab our harness, run it over to this side, and I'm gonna let that sit right there, and I'm gonna go ahead and put everything back together. We'll finish up with the glove box and alarm mounting at the end. Putting everything back together, we're gonna start with our screen. Because you have that hidden screw on the driver's side, you have to make sure that you kind of hook that in behind your cluster bezel, but we'll make sure everything's plugged in before we do that. All right, and now everything else will go back together just like we removed it. All right, then don't forget the tube behind your screen. All right, and lastly, we'll get our two side panels snapped back in. Make sure that you get them lined up with the holes. All right, so now we're ready to mount the alarm, and all we have to do is plug this in. We have our shock sensitivity right here. What I like to do is turn it all the way down and go up about maybe a little bit more than a quarter. And that's a nice place to start. Then I like to get it mounted in a position where I can still access this to adjust or fine tune the sensitivity. It would be nice if we could just mount it against these wires here, zip tie it up, but it's a little too big and your glove box doesn't like it. So I found this bracket right on the side here is a really nice place to mount it up. Having the alarm kind of tucked up right in here leaves you access to that sensitivity screw, and it doesn't interfere with your glove box. So I'm gonna grab one of the included zip ties. I'm actually gonna string it around that bracket that's holding those antenna lines on. All right, so just like that, you wanna kind of just rope right on the back side of that bracket. You can also zip tie it a little bit just to keep it in place. Then I'll grab the whole alarm, put it right in there, and now I'll zip tie it tight. So something just like that. So you can see our adjusting screw right up top there, and this is plenty of clearance for our glove box. There we go. Now before we throw our glove box back in there, I'm going to check shock sensitivity as well as remote start function, make sure everything works. Once we're tested and functioning properly, you can go ahead and slide the glove box back in. All right, so we're in a 2021 and up Ford Bronco. This is not the Bronco Sport. This is regular Ford Bronco. They're all the same though as far as the gateway module location. So we're going to be installing this Perimeter Plus OEM alarm system with remote start in here. It's pretty easy to do. You're going to drop your glove box. And on the right side, you have this little arm that's attached. It slows down the drop of the glove box. What you're going to want to do is push up and pull out. You see that arm is free now. And then on either side, you have this little push latch that locks that glove box in place. So put my fingers up here, squeeze, that'll drop the glove box, and then you can just pull straight out. So now that that's out of the way, we can access our gateway module, which is right to the right side of this little arm here. All right, so right here on the inside, you see this module right here. This is your gateway module. At the bottom is where your gateway plug is going to be. That's where we're going to install our T-harness for our Perimeter Plus alarm system. If you get in there, you squeeze and pull down. Should be able to remove that connector pretty easily. That's the push button that you need to get to. Now it is aiming towards or away from you, towards the outside of the vehicle. So the way I get it is I just stick my fingers in there, squeeze, and then pull straight down. But now that this is out of the way, I can go ahead and install my T-harness. I'll route the alarm up to on the side here and probably zip tie it up, maybe on this harness in here or on the inside of your glove box. Really doesn't matter where you mount it. Just make sure that you have the shock sensor accessible so you can adjust that and fine tune it before you lock it up into place and never see it again. All right, that's all we got for the Ford Bronco. All right, and that about wraps it up. We wanted to give you some examples of gateway modules that you need access to install your OEM Perimeter Plus security system with remote start. So if you didn't see your vehicle in the video, please comment below on a vehicle that you wanted to see it in, and we'll try to make that happen for you. If you like this video and you want to see more just like it, please head back to infotainment.com. Thanks for watching.